Uzumaki is one of my favorite horror manga ever created, hands down. The problem with Uzumaki, however, is recommending it to my friends. I find it very difficult to provide a convincing verbal elevator pitch. So in making this video, I hope to convince some of my friends to give Uzumaki a read. It's arguably one of the greatest works of Japanese horror and horror in general. Although you might not be familiar with Uzumaki, you might have seen panels from the manga circulate around the internet. This one in particular. Uzumaki's author, Junji Ito, has had a lot of his work posted out of context, making its way onto people's social media feeds. I'm sure a lot of people have seen panels not only from Uzumaki, but also Tomie, another one of Ito's more famous works. This is mainly due in part to how terrifying and creepy a lot of these panels are. Ito has no problem when it comes to capturing the macabre, but also putting an incredible amount of detail into each and every scene. Almost everyone who has read an Ito manga can appreciate Ito's ability to push the boundaries of horror through still images. I believe part of why the Junji Ito collection actually failed was due to the high bar set by Ito and his manga, and also a multitude of other reasons, but that's besides the point. Uzumaki is a manga you should read before you die, and with Halloween around the corner and Adult Swim's adaptation coming out now is a perfect time to do so. And I'm hoping that with this video, I can push you to go ahead and do so. To discuss Uzumaki without discussing its author would be doing it a huge disservice. I consider Junji Ito to be almost inseparable from his work, like Miura with Berserk, Araki with JoJo, and Toriyama with Dragon Ball Z. What makes Ito different from these authors, however, is that he's not known for just one specific work, which is in no way me saying that Ito is better than the aforementioned authors, but I do think that the way people approach Ito's work is much different from approaching other manga. I've heard people compare him to Stephen King, and I can see the similarities. Although Stephen King has had some works that are more popular than others, I feel like people read his books because it was written by him as opposed to being a specific series or universe. Same goes for Ito. Sure, you could argue Uzumaki or the Tomie series to be his best works, but I think people like to read Ito for Ito. Just like any other great artist, Ito takes inspiration from other works and his own personal life. Born July 31st, 1963, Ito grew up in a small city near Nagano. His two older sisters introduced him to manga, and Ito began reading the works of Kazuo Umezu, who was a pioneer in the creation of the horror manga genre. Another author whose work Ito enjoyed was H.P. Lovecraft's. At some point early on in Ito's life, he decided to take what he had learned from reading manga and books and start making his own manga as a hobby. This went on until Ito was a young adult and was conflicted between taking his manga seriously or focus on his job as a dental technician. However, in 1987, Junji Ito got his big break after a short story he submitted to the monthly Halloween magazine won him an honorable mention in the Kazuo Umezu Prize. One of the judges for the prize was his inspiration, Umezu himself. This short story ended up forming into the series Tomie, but that's a story for another Halloween. Uzumaki takes place in a small, quiet Japanese town called Kurozucho, following the lives of Kiri and her boyfriend Shuichi. Both are ordinary teenagers in high school, a bold departure from what you usually see in anime. One day, while Kiri is walking through the town to go meet Shuichi, she spots Shuichi's dad hunched over, with his attention completely fixated on a spiral snail shell. When Kiri tries to get his attention, he simply ignores her, as he is too focused on what sits before him. Although Kiri is genuinely weirded out by this, she continues on her way to see her boyfriend. Once they meet up, Shuichi confirms to Kiri that the man she saw was indeed his father, and that he has been acting strange recently. Shuichi himself hasn't been acting well either, and out of nowhere proposes that he and Kiri leave their town and run away together. Shuichi is tired of living in Kurozucho and feels that the town is driving him insane, and saying that the town is contaminated with spirals. To Shuichi, Kurozucho is a prison that he must escape, or else he fears that he will be trapped there forever. The next day, Kiri comes home to find Shuichi's father conversing with Kiri's dad. Shuichi's father rambles on and on and on about Kiri's father's talent as a potter and his ability to make the ceramics and have them spin in a spiral. He goes on about how much he enjoys seeing spirals everywhere, whether it be in kimonos, fossils, and many other things you find throughout nature. You even have spirals on yourself if you look closely at your fingers. When Shuichi and Kiri meet again, Shuichi tells Kiri that her father's obsession has worsened. His collection of spiral objects has grown. He cannot take a bath without first making the water spin like a whirlpool, and he yells at his wife for not including spiral fish cakes in his soup. To try to put a stop to this obsession, Shuichi's mother throws away her husband's spiral collection, but this only makes matters worse. However, Shuichi's father reaches an epiphany. You don't need to collect spiral objects when you can make spirals with your own body. And with that, Shuichi's father begins rolling his eyeballs rapidly in separate directions. A few days pass, and we see Kiri delivering the pottery Shuichi's father wanted over to his home. Shuichi's father politely declines the pottery he originally asked for, and reiterates that he doesn't need spiral objects, since he can just make them with his own body. And with that, Shuichi's father begins to, well, do this. This rightfully scares Kiri as she dashes right out of Shuichi's home, just as another visitor comes to the house, with an item that Shuichi's father has been excitedly waiting for. Several days later, we find out Shuichi's father has passed away. At the funeral, visitors are told that Mr. Saito met his demise when he fell down a flight of stairs. This is revealed to be a lie, with Shuichi telling Kiri what really happened. After coming back from a visit to the doctor, Shuichi and his mother come home to find an empty house, with Mr. Saito nowhere to be found. What they do find is a mysterious tub in the middle of his study, and upon opening it, they find Mr. Saito inside. His obsession reaching a climax with him turning himself into a spiral. This bizarre and grotesque act led him to crushing all of his bones and killing himself in his own pursuit to model the spiral pattern. And that is the end of Chapter 1. It only gets more horrific from here, as the town figuratively and literally spirals into madness right before the eyes of Kiri and Shuichi. There's a number of elements that make Uzumaki such a terrifying read. As the story progresses, there is a feeling of the small town suffocating you, reflecting the sentiments of Shuichi and Kiri. Uzumaki shares a lot in common with Lovecraftian and cosmic horror, as the threat of the spiral is something that is simply incomprehensible to our main characters. There's no monster, evil spirit, or any real quantifiable boogeyman that terrorizes Kurozucho, but rather an idea that is planted into the minds of the townsfolk, growing into something far more sinister than your typical horror movie creature. What's ironic is that the spiral itself is a symbol of positivity in Japan, generally associated with friendly and amicable people or things. And in Uzumaki, any meaning behind the spiral is twisted and perverted into this vile and sickening entity. When I first read Uzumaki, I felt a consistent feeling of dread as I began to realize that the horror that awaited the villagers was inescapable. Ito takes full advantage of telling the story through the manga medium. There will be a lot of moments where he will dreadfully stretch a suspenseful scene across panels or pages, before revealing the shocking scene in incredibly hideous detail. Sequences like these are common throughout all of Junji Ito's works, but that doesn't make the setup any less shocking or hackneyed. Uzumaki is a manga that is a must-read. I would trade a lot to relive my experience of reading this manga for the first time. I know a lot of my friends prefer to watch anime instead of reading manga, but I urge you to read this. Even though there is supposed to be an Uzumaki anime sometime, the manga is worth the read, to directly see Ito's ability to make a masterclass in horror. For those who have already read Uzumaki but are looking for more Ito work, I recommend The Enigma of Amigara Fault, The Hanging Balloons, The Window Next Door, The Woman Next Door, Army of One, any of the Tomie short stories, and Blood Bubble Bushes. I haven't read Glyceride, No Longer Human, or Gyo, but I have heard those are good. If you have read those, let me know how they are in the comments below. Also, please let me know of any other Ito stories worth checking out. I'm always open to reading any of Junji Ito's novels. Thank you everyone for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and let me know what you think of Uzumaki, especially if you've already read it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next solo video.